Good morning, NBC. This is Pastor Charlie coming to you with the Word of God for Wednesday, February 17th. I'm reading from Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 through 21. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by a boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowd followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it is already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. This is the word of the Lord. A very famous passage about one of the famous miracles of Jesus, feeding of the over 5,000 people with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Now, in the beginning of this passage, verse 13, it says, when Jesus heard what had happened. Now, just the verses before yesterday's reading, we read that John the Baptist had been beheaded by Herod because, now to abbreviate the long story, is that he had taken his brother Philip's wife, Herodias, which John the Baptist had called him upon and said, "You can't take her as your wife. That's not lawful for you." And he had him imprisoned. And of course, this couple, it was a big stink for them that the prophet of God was alive, calling out on their error. So there was a feast or some kind of a party, and Herodias' daughter, some seductive dance that had pleased Herod so much that he had pledged to give her whatever they wanted. And Herodias, seizing that opportunity, told Herod, "I want the head of John the Baptist on a platter." And after he was taken, his disciples came and took his body, and they had told Jesus. After hearing this news is when Jesus withdraws by boat and goes to a solitary place. And as he's trying to, if you could picture this in your mind, he's going away. He wants to be alone. And yet the people are following and they're crowding around him. I wonder if you are able to feel what he must have felt to hear about John going the way he did. Because remember, John is the forerunner for Jesus Christ. John was the one that was sent ahead of him to herald his coming. And the way he exited is also a kind of a preview of how the Son of Man must also be taken up on the cross. Jesus just exudes this compassion on the large crowd. It says here in verse 14 that he had compassion on the many people, even though he probably had his own personal needs to wish to be alone, but nevertheless he still extended his healing upon the sick. And when the evening approaches, the disciples are like, "Hey, it's getting late, let's send them away." And of course they are thinking practically, their concerns are practical, but we notice that Jesus' concerns is well above the practical needs. He's the very solution to the practical needs. The question is, how do we believe this story can play out in our days? Now, it has been preached many a times before that you bring whatever little thing you have. If you bring it all in front of Jesus, at the feet of Jesus, He will multiply them. So whether it be a small offering that you bring, like the widow that brought the 2 mites compared to the people that gave in their abundance, the fact that she was able to give all of what belonged to her was a great offering. And this is something that we notice happening everywhere. Just the other day we heard a testimony from our brother Peter, who went to Africa, about how people had brought just a small, what in our eyes seemed like a nominal offering, but because they're able to pool this together, they have now they're able to fund the schools, they are able to fund the teachers, they're able to improve the lives of the community because of the small offerings that are brought. I think it's a very practical way in which the vision of what we read in the text here comes to full reality. I want you all to notice that the stories of the miracles are teaching us to be able to envision something that seems impossible from the outset, but then after you put that initial trust in the Lord, in the living God, that He will be able to bring it into fruition and in reality in ways that we had not imagined before. So with this word, I hope that you are able to gain some encouragement, and that throughout the rest of the week, may it go well with you, and may you be in His shalom.